Good morning. It is my honor and joy to introduce our guest lecturer today, Pastor Alexander Brooks. Pastor Brooks is from Monrovia, Liberia, and he will be lecturing us today on the topic of African traditional religion, ATR, or ancestry worship. Dr. Brooks has obtained his Bachelor of Theology degree from the Sierra Leone College. He has taken coursework for a year, 2020, at the Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary in North Carolina. His preparatory work for his PhD program in theology. Currently, Dr. Brooks holds a Master's of Systematic Theology from Cuttington University, and he is a candidate for the Master of Political Science in International Relationships, University of Liberia. Pastor Brooks has also enrolled in the PhD program of theology in South Africa Theological Seminary, and he did this in 2019. He has lectured at the William R. Tolbert International Theological Institute in Liberia. He's lectured at the AME Zion University in Sierra Leone. He has lectured at the Trinity Bible College and School of Business, and he has also lectured at the Liberia Baptist Theological Seminary. Pastor Brooks presently serves as the academic dean for the Liberian Baptist Seminary and has done so for the past 11 years. He has recently been appointed as Assistant Graduate Dean of Liberia Baptist Seminary, which will be effective April 2022. Dr. Brooks is an experienced pastor, having served the First Baptist Church in New Crewtown, Liberia. He served there for 14 years, and after 6 years of different engagements outside of the church, he was called back to this church again in 2020. His literary works include Biblical Designs for Effective Deacons and Essentials of Biblical Exegesis, a primer for pastors and deacons. Dr. Brooks is married to his wife, Valerie. They're the proud parents of 4 children. He has extensive education. I've had the opportunity of being in the church where he pastors when we went on our missionary trip to Liberia, met an exciting people, an exciting church. And it's my joy this morning to introduce our lecturer today, Dr. Alexander Brooks.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, my brothers and sisters in the Lord. I'm not quite sure what the time is in the United States at the moment, but I bring you greetings from Liberia, particularly from my church and my family. I am completely delighted that we can interface through this medium. I am also excited about this opportunity of sharing with you some basic insights about African traditional religion, often referred to as ATR. I'm sure at this moment you have your notes with you, and what I want you to do simply throughout the lecture is just to underline those words that I have italicized throughout the notes. And the rationale for that is just to indicate that you are following up with the lectures. Simply that. As you may know, Christianity has made a lot of inroads in many parts of the world. In other words, Christianity has influenced many lives, cultures, and civilizations around the world for a very, very long time. But as you may come to know now, Christianity is being rivaled by many other religious alternatives. including African traditional religion. African traditional religion, often referred to as ATR, is having massive influence on the lives of many people around the world, especially in Africa, where African traditional beliefs and practices are prevalent. And this has happened so much that many people are embracing ATR as the religious alternative for Africans. And what comes to my mind as I come to grip with this reality is it actually the religious alternative for Africans? And if so, does that mean that we have to give up Christianity as a religion of the West, as they claim? Another thing that comes up as a consequence of the influence of ATR is the fact that some hold on to the beliefs and practices of ATR along with those of Christianity, and that's what I term as dual allegiance. And this happened, as I know, in Africa, where African Christians will oscillate between African traditional beliefs and practices and those of Christianity as they find them addressing their needs at a particular time, a particular point in time. And is this the right thing to do? Should we hold that dual allegiance? Another thing that has happened as a consequence of the growing influence of ATR in many parts of the world, especially in Africa, is the fact that many Christians have decided to hold on to the Christian faith as the true alternative. And if it is so, then how can we, meaning you and myself, how can we share our faith or the Christian message in the context of African traditional beliefs and practices? I'm quite sure that we'll be able to address these questions from our understanding of African traditional religion based on the discussion of the following 4 subtopics. I know that African traditional religion as a topic is broad, so we are going to look at it in the light of 4 parameters, four subtopics that would enable us to actually focus on specific aspects of African traditional religion. And they include the history and background of African traditional religion, the basic beliefs and practices of African traditional religion, the relationship between Christianity and African traditional religion, meaning how is Christianity different from ATR? And then 4, how can we share our faith, the message of Christianity, to those who are followers of ATR? Please understand that I will be using both interchangeably. I will use African traditional religion at some point in time, ATR, or for the most part, ATR. So hope you understand. I want to look at the history of African traditional religion, of ATR. What is ATR, first of all? I believe that understanding the phenomenon is quite important if you would like to talk about when it started. You first must know what it is. And there are 2 ways to talk about African traditional religion. First is loosely as what is not Christian. This notion developed some time ago during the colonial period in Africa, when early missionaries who came to Africa thought of everything as devilish, fetish, and heathen. And so what was not Christian was just considered as devilish, ungodly, unchristian. So it is used derogatorily to talk about African traditional religion. But the second way to talk about it is ATR is a religious alternative worthy of study or serious study at theological seminaries. It is a religion just as you speak of Christianity. And this concept developed when African scholars began to sense that there were some Western tendencies and colonial tendencies that were demeaning the African culture, beliefs, and practices. And so their engagements were to remove those Western tendencies and, that were demeaning, and be able to make African traditional religion to stand out as a serious alternative for Africans. And that actually happened during the post-colonial period, when most African states were trying to wriggle out of their colonial domination, when they were trying to gain independence from the Western or European powers. So as a religious alternative, as an authentic African experience, what is ATR as a religious alternative, if we look at it that way? African scholars are in agreement about what they think it is. They think that it refers to the beliefs and practices that are expressed through the cultural and traditional beliefs and practices of Africans. In that way, they believe that African traditional religion is embedded in Africa's cultural and traditional beliefs and practices. It is embedded in the traditional lives of Africans. So much so that the link between both is inseparable. Means that you can really separate African traditional beliefs and practices from African traditional religious practices and beliefs. In short, I conclude that as a religious phenomenon, ATR is that phenomenon, that religious phenomenon, that significantly expresses Africa's traditional beliefs and practices and is expressed by them. So in short, if you want to understand what African traditional religion is, you must also understand Africans and their cultural and traditional beliefs and practices. They are inseparable from African traditional beliefs and practices. Having said that, we want to trace the roots of ATR as a religion that is rooted in African traditional beliefs and practices. Not to waste your time, I can say the date of origin of ATR is completely unknown. No scholar has said any possible date. Not that I've read. If you've read it, well, that'll be fine. You can share that with us. And some of the factors that are leading to this would include three things that I mentioned here below. One is that there are no founders and no prophets. Second is no evidence of ATR springing out of any revelatory experience. And the third, there are no sacred scriptures. Let's look at them. Every major religion has known founders and prophets who propagated the messages of those religions. And to know something about the date of origin, you will look at the time those prophets and founders existed in history. You will be able to make some determination about the date of origin. With ATR, we have no such information, so there's no way to make any intelligent guess about the date of origin. Secondly, ATR has no evidence of springing out of any revelatory experience. And that I mean that ATR is not a faith that was revealed to anybody. As you will see in Judaism to Moses, some would say Christianity to Jesus, as we would say, and then Islam to Muhammad. About ATR, nothing. So, in short, ATR has no known date of origin. The date of origin is completely unknown. Some scholars, something that we know, I know about some guess about a date of origin is what is said here as ATR is as old as the first African. And there's no evidence of that. Nobody knows when the first Africans lived. But I know what I think here is that this is just meant to say that ATR predates Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, and so it is the oldest religion. There's no evidence for that. So what we said so far is that ATR is embedded in the traditional lives and practices of Africans. It is inseparable from those. And secondly, it has no date of origin, no known date of origin. Nobody knows that. If you know that, please let me know when you are sending me your questions. All right. The second thing we want to look at are the basic beliefs and practices of ATR. Before looking at them, I just want to mention some difficulties in fully identifying and analyzing ATR's principal beliefs and practices. One is because there are no sacred scriptures. One of the things that we analyze when we want to analyze or identify the beliefs and practices of other religions would be the scriptures that they have. ATR does not have sacred books, no scriptures, so we cannot say fully these are the beliefs and practices. However, scholars have been able to identify the beliefs, areas of beliefs and practices, and we're going to look at them below. Another difficulty is the fact that, as we said about African traditional beliefs, African traditional religion is rooted in the traditional beliefs and practices of Africans. And because of the multiplicity of traditional cultural identities across Africa, it is not easy to see ATR as a single religion, and opinions are divided. There are some scholars who say, well, ATR is an expression of multiple African cultural identities, and it's reasonable because if you have different cultural identities and ATR is rooted in those identities, then it's reasonable for one to think ATR is just multiple religious expressions. The second thing is, according to some scholars, yes, no, even though there are multiple cultural identities, but there is something that fundamentally cut across those different identities, just as we have in Christianity we have different denominations. You have, and you can name them, all across the United States, all across the world, in Africa and elsewhere. But there are things, fundamental beliefs that tied us together as Christians. So in spite of the fact that there are multiple cultural identities in Africa, scholars still believe that there are things that keep them together as a single religion. And they are here mentioned, we can look at them quickly, as they believe in the supreme being, they believe in the realm of the spirit, and they believe in a unified community. Let's discuss them one by one and see how we can use them to understand the beliefs and practices of Africans, ATR. One, ATR believes in a supreme being. One of the fundamental things to the existence of every religion is they believe in a supreme being, and the relation and how adherents of that religion relate to him. And so Africans too believe in a supreme being, a supreme deity, and seek to relate to him. The way God is perceived in ATR is often thought to be polytheistic. That is, people think that Africans believe in many gods, and I will look at that shortly. But Africans perceive God in a way that is monotheistic. That means they believe in one God. Africans believe that there's one God who is the creator of all things. And this God is spirit, and he is accessible to all humankind. He is all powerful, he is all knowing, and he sees all things. These are similar characteristics that we shared about God in Christianity. And these are similar things that Africans think about, said about God in that they believe. One of the reasons why people think of Africans as being polytheistic is because the manner in which they relate to this God. They relate to God through intermediaries in a way that make those intermediaries to appear as though they should be the primary element of focus. Africans believe in a supreme being, but daily they relate to that God through intermediaries, through several divinities, several deities, and through ancestors and other means and mediums. So as they relate to God through this medium, they tend to give credit to these divinities as though they were the ones producing the results. And it's reasonable. Any human being will want to relate to those divinities, those deities, as actually the ones producing the results, and give allegiance to them. So in that way, it appears as though Africans are polytheistic. They worship many gods, they believe in many gods, but actually Africans believe in one supreme God. With spirit, we can relate to him, even though he is an impersonal spirit. The second thing I would like to mention about Africans' belief, as mentioned up there, is they believe in the existence of the spirit word. There is an intermediary word between the word of the living and where God is. And that is the word of the spirits. Africans or adherents of ATR believe that the spirits of their dead relatives go to the spirit world where they reside. And you will realize that if you ever came to Africa and you were present at some burial ceremonies, that the living would give messages to the dead for their dead relatives. Yes, they would give them messages. We say hello to you. You can bless us, remember us. We are still here, and we are looking up to you for the success of the family. Yes, those things happen. But I also believe that the spirit of the dead remains in contact with the living. I mean, that shows that what I just said shows that the spirits of the dead remain in contact with the living, at least up to the fourth and fifth generations, when memories of them are gone. And it is at that time that those spirits become impersonal. They are forgotten. Nobody relates to them anymore. Nobody thinks about how they might be in relationship with the living. All right. Okay, but why in that time before the fourth and fifth generations, why the spirits of the dead are in relationship with the living? Followers of ATR believe that the spirits of the dead participate in the daily routines of the living. It means that there is this constant relationship where the living would seek the advice of the dead for the success of the family, for the misfortunes that befall the families, individuals. All right. So time after time, they will perform rituals in relating to the word of the Spirit. It is also believed that that the spirits of the dead will bestow fortunes upon the living, and they will cause misfortune to befall the living as well. And depending on how the living will keep up with their dictates. If you follow the rules, follow what the dead will want you to do, or the spirits of the dead will want you to do, and you remain in that constant relationship with them, fortunes will befall the family and you personally. And if you go against them, misfortunes. And also, the living believe that the spirits of the dead will act as mediator between God and humans. And so they will seek to make sacrifices. They will seek to do many things that will keep that relationship going so that they can be in good relationship with God. And I will tell you why they do that as we go on in the rest of the lectures. So what we said so far is the Africans believe in the supreme deity. They believe in an intermediary world where the spirits of the dead reside and remain in constant relationship with the living until they are forgotten up to the fourth generations. It is then that they are considered completely dead when memories of them is gone. But while in relationship with the living, it is believed that they participate in their daily routines. They bestow fortunes and cause misfortunes before people, and they act as intermediaries between God and the living. So you see in the belief system of ATR the existence of two worlds, the world of the spirits and the world of the living, and there is constant interactions between them. Okay, let us look at the third area of belief in ATR that I would like to mention, the belief in a unified community. As you may know, human existence in the traditional African society is seen in the light of communities. Africans exist in communities, they exist for the communities, they exist for the good of the communities. And so people in communities must exist in harmony with one another, with the ancestors and with the gods, in order to maintain the harmony of the community. And scholars will say a cosmic balance. It is that balance that enables people to be able to exert themselves to achieve their personal well-being as well as the well-being of the community. But it is believed that there are some supernatural forces that would intentionally work against that process. And these forces include evil spirits, witches, and sorcerers that influence people in a community to engage into antisocial behavior that will attract punishment from gods, or from the ancestors and from the divinities. And the purpose or the intent of these forces is just to inflict harm, to cause evil. There are other supernatural forces which are good ones that could also inflict physical evil. But for them, it is meant to correct, it is meant to warn, or it is meant to punish. And that is to keep the community, people in the community in good relationship with one another, with the ancestors and with the gods, so as to continue to benefit from them. And these spirits will include God, deities, and the ancestors. So two kinds of spirits: the spirit that intentionally harm, and those that actually inflict punishment to correct and to warn. All right, let's look at some practices. And as you may know, practices are ways we express our beliefs. All right, let's look at some ways in which Africans, followers of ATR, actually express their beliefs. One is in the veneration or worship of ancestors. And I say veneration or worship. Scholarly opinions vary. But it is the practice of approaching the spirits of the dead as intermediaries between God and them. And it is done through the performance of rituals that include sacrifices and prayers. It is believed that as the spirits of the dead are in contact with the living, they possess supernatural powers, or the kind of power to be able to influence their future in a positive way. So time after time, the living will perform these rituals, rituals or sacrifices, prayers, in order to maintain a good relationship with the spirits of the dead, with the ancestors. As I said earlier, scholars' opinion vary. Some would think that is worship, based on what they see as an outright dependence of the living upon the spirits of the dead, and they see that that allegiance as worship. Others will say no, it's just merely honoring them for the good things they've done for the living. So it depends on where you come from. You may want to know where I stand. I will oscillate between both. At some point, it appears as though it is honoring them, venerating them, and at some point, it actually borders on worship. The second area of sacrifice is, area of practice is the offering of sacrifices. And offering sacrifices is a way of maintaining or restoring a broken relationship with divinity, with the ancestors, and with the community. And when sacrifices are offered, you are trying to demand the attention of the divinities, or of the ancestors, of the gods, to interfere on your behalf, to remove your suffering or the situation that beset you. Or do you want to just simply maintain that relationship that you enjoy? Simply that. And the sacrifices are performed either by using an animal or by simply giving money to the specialists who will perform the sacrifice. It depends on what they want. It seems that most times they want the money to be able to acquire the rightful materials themselves. The last thing I would like to talk about in terms of practices is the consultation of medicine men, as we call it here, or sorcerers. And there is a practice of seeking the help of persons believed to have some mystical powers that would enable you to remove the dangers that beset you and perhaps bestow fortunes. And so people would go back and forth to these people that they believe have the power to remove the evil that beset them and enable them to experience prosperity, wellness, and whatever that may be that is good for them. And sometimes it requires quite a lot. You will have to regularly perform some rituals in order to maintain that sacrifice, the value of that sacrifice, the potency of that sacrifice. You have to perform some rituals regularly. There are some recitations, there are some things you have to recite. There are some things you have to do every morning. Sometimes you have to wear the talisman. You have to be careful with the rules so that it will continue to maintain its power. It's very expensive. All right, having said this, we want us to look at how then ATR is different from scripture truth. And I would like to mention these real quickly because of time. One, ATR did not originate from any revelatory experience. No, it is wrapped up in the cultural beliefs and practices of Africans. Christianity, on the other hand, sprouted out of the revealed truths recorded in the Old and New Testaments of the Bible. Secondly, ATR does not have scriptures. Christianity has the inspired Word of God that is contained in the Bible and is recorded in both the Old and New Testaments. We are encouraged to diligently seek the scriptures, to study them, and follow the Word of God in our lives and for our lives. ATR has no prophets. We have no evidence of anybody propagating its message at any point in time in history. But for Christianity, there are many, many prophets. from the time of the Old Testament to the New Testament. There are men of God who were inspired and whose examples also would guide us as we live for God. The fourth thing is that salvation in ATR seems to be related to the physical well-being of people, and people will have to be in harmony with others, with the ancestors, in order to be able to experience a good life or to achieve their well-being. But in Christianity, salvation addresses our human problem. It addresses our sin-stricken nature. We have to accept Jesus Christ to transform that nature so that we become new creatures and we can live in the will and purpose of God. ATR uses intermediaries like human agencies, divinities, ancestors, ancestral spirits, all of these that are also dependent upon the true and living God. Christianity, on the other hand, encourages a personal relationship with the person who himself is God, and that is Jesus Christ. In ATR, there is no regular worship. There is no mandate to worship. You worship only when you want to achieve something in your life. There is some punishment that you want to ward off. There is some danger that you want to deal with. You want to remove, and so you seek to worship your ancestors, to offer sacrifices to them, or to venerate them as to just maintain a balance. But for Christianity, no, we don't have to do that. We don't have to perform those rituals just to remain in good relationship with the ancestors. In Christianity, we worship God. He called upon us to worship Him, to be a worshiping community, so as to remain in fellowship with Him. And so we meet regularly to worship God in accordance with His word, in accordance with His purpose. Finally, ATR has no message, no hope of the resurrection. In Christianity, yes, it is this message that we promote. That when we die, we are not going to remain in the word of the ancestors. We are going to live beyond this terrestrial existence. We are going to be with the Lord forever. We will be transformed. And as a new resurrected community, we will be in new bodies, living in the presence of God forever. And this is our message. Having said this, how then do we witness to adherents of ATR? There are no specific ways. It depends on the context in which you find yourselves and whoever you encounter and where. But there are a few things you would like to understand, basically about Africans in general. And one is to understand that they are chiefly concerned about acquiring great wealth, about prosperity, long life, and it's all about personal well-being. And because of that, even those who are Christians will offer prayers time after time, seeking their well-being, seeking their prosperity, and so forth, and countering those forces that they believe are inhibiting their success. So the way to reach out to them is to make sure that you listen to them, to tell their story. What are their felt needs? And then you can find appropriate stories. Actually, Bible stories will work very well than theological arguments. So you find stories that will tell of similar needs that God met. All right, I mentioned a few of them. You can look at them and let them know that God is faithful and God has the power to be able to deal with the situation. Just be careful not to make promises that similar things will happen to them as they happen in the scriptures. Exactly as they happen. God has his own way of dealing with situations in our time. And then share whatever you want to share and pray with them. Another thing that you want to be aware of as you minister to them is to know that they deal with their problems in concrete ways, not using theological arguments. All right, so you will want to look at stories like Christ's death as the actual victory over these evil powers and the spirits and even death. Right? So tell it in a way that Christ defeated the evil forces, evil powers, and even death. And when they put their trust in Christ Jesus and believe in him, in his redemptive work, God is faithful to his promises and he will help them. Also understand that sin, as understood in their belief, is not necessarily moral. It is social. It's primarily social. Relationships are broken with others, with the unseen word, with the same word, and so you have to tell the story of how sin is seen as moral, on the other hand. And so you have to go to the story of Adam and tell the story how Adam fell and sin affected the entire human race, and how our nature is corrupted and we have become slaves to sin and to Satan. And let them know that we cannot manipulate God for our physical blessings, for our protection, and for our deliverance. All we have to do is just to go towards him and know that God is gracious. And by his grace, relying on his grace alone, he is able to deliver us out of the yoke of sin. Let us know that Christ has the power to save, and he has complete victory over evil powers. The fourth thing you would like them to know is to understand that message of hope. ATR does not have the message of hope beyond this word. There's no clear message of hope, and you want to present it to them. Yes, we are children of God. When you accept Jesus Christ, you have become part of the families of God, the family of God. And when Jesus comes, we as the family of God will rise again, and we will be with him forever. This is the message of hope. We will live with him forever. This is the hope that Christianity offers, and that I just don't find in other religions, and not even in ATR. All right, we have come to the conclusion of our lectures. I do not claim to have said everything about African traditional religion. I do not believe that anybody can be exhaustive or can provide an exhaustive treatment of any subject. Not at all. And so I am completely humbled about this. I believe that I've said few things that will be very helpful in your quest in ascertaining the truth about ATR and being resilient enough to share the message of God with people in the context of African traditional religion. God bless you. I await your questions, and I hope by the grace of God, one day I might see you. Thank you, and God bless you.